On my wedding day, my husband Dan B, in order to give his childhood sweetheart a lavish and extravagant ceremony, orchestrated a switch. He had me sent to a side courtyard, while he and his beloved exchanged vows in the main hall. I was rather surprised. I, Amelia Thorne, the sole daughter of the wealthiest merchant in the South, have never been known for my gentle or demure nature. How did they possibly think I would swallow such an insult? Ah, right. Because they are a noble house, and my family are mere merchants. Because they had a hall full of esteemed guests and a grand procession, while I was marrying far from home, an easy target to be manipulated. Ha, they wish. My lady, there are so many guards at the courtyard gate, yet the festive music is so loud. What is this noble house trying to do? Intimidate us. This is too much. My maid Lily exclaimed angrily. My other maid, Ivy, opened a red sandalwood chest and began selecting a suitable weapon. It seems that when they were negotiating the marriage, they were so dazzled by father's gold that they forgot to inquire about my character. If there is any intimidating to be done, it will be me doing it. Bring my hidden weapons. Let's go. The moment the three of us stepped out of the room, several burly men blocked our path. Bride, a wife must obey her husband. The second young master has ordered you to remain in this courtyard for the time being. A fine, obey her husband. But I haven't even gone through the ceremony. How can I be considered married? I couldn't be bothered to argue with them. I ordered Lily to take out the hidden weapons. A gold bar for each of you. Consider yourselves knocked out by me. The men exchanged glances. And so, after hiding their gold bars, they all collapsed to the ground. A corner of my lips curved into a smile. I had long heard that the House of Sterling was living on borrowed time, with nothing left but its noble facade. They were marrying me to quickly fill their empty coffers and return to their former glory, but their method of seeking wealth was far from sincere. To act so despicably on the wedding day itself, well, they shouldn't blame me for teaching them some manners. The couple shall bow to each other. The master of ceremonies' voice faltered. The celebratory music screeched to a halt. The entire hall of guests stared in astonishment at the group of people who had suddenly burst in. Ivy had already summoned my dowry servants, who had been sent to the north courtyard. I had 12 of my family's best bodyguards clear a path, dressed in my crimson wedding gown, holding a jeweled Zan-encrusted fan. I had removed the veil to better enjoy the show. I gracefully walked in. These were first Dan rate guards, handpicked by my father from our own security agency. They had been tricked earlier only because they were new to the capital and assumed the noble house had strict protocols. Now, knowing the truth, they were filled with rage, itching to pick up the groom, Lord Alistair, and toss him around a few times. The head guard, a man named Mason, suppressed his anger and announced in a loud voice, "Is the Lord Mayor present? A thieving woman is impersonating our young lady, brazenly marrying the second young master of this house. And more than half of our young lady's 100 Zancart dowry is missing." Another guard shouted. The hall erupted in an uproar. The groom, Alistair, stood dumbfounded, clearly not expecting us to make such a scene and tear away their last shred of dignity. The Marchioness, Lady Sterling, turned pale with rage, pointing at me and stammering, You people." Fortunately, the Marquess of Sterling reacted quickly, slapping her hand down. They couldn't afford this humiliation, nor could they afford to offend their source of wealth. "Ivy, seize this impostor. Have the Lord Mayor send his constables to take her to the authorities?" As soon as Mason finished speaking, Ivy, who was behind me, spun around and seized the fake bride's arm. Ivy was a master of martial arts, my personal maid and bodyguard. "Ah, let go of me. Alistair, save me!" the fake bride cried out, her weak voice laced with sobs designed to evoke pity. "I'd like to see any of you try," Alistair shouted, glaring daggers at me. His true colors were showing. The truth is, Alistair and I weren't complete strangers. When the House of Sterling first proposed marriage, my father had insisted that Alistair stay in our southern home for a while to get to know me, to see if we were a compatible match. After all, while my father didn't mind that they were after our family's money. As he said, "You are my only precious daughter. Who else would this fortune go to?" He loathed deception, especially attempts to deceive his beloved daughter's heart. That was a truly heinous crime. And so, the spring we spent together was as romantic and tender as a painting of two lovers. Flying kites in the fields, boating on the lake, whispering wishes in the misty rain, writing love poems under the moon. A series of scenes still vivid in my mind. But the gentleman of yesterday had become a shameless brute. In late spring, seeing that he had won my heart, Alistair said he had to return to the capital to prepare for the imperial examinations. Though I am a nobleman's son, I want to enter officialdom based on my own merits. Amelia, wait for me. I will not only make you the young lady of a noble house, but the wife of the top scholar. Only now did I realize that his preparations were not for an exam, but for a wedding, a fraudulent one. What does the second young master mean by that? Is this thief your accomplice? I sneered. With a slight raise of my eyebrow, Ivy understood and ripped the veil from the fake bride's head. Well, isn't this the Marquis's cousin, Lady Evelyn? She is an orphan from the Marchioness's side of the family raised in the house. She and the second young master grew up together. I once teased them about marrying, and the Marchioness glared at me, telling me not to speak nonsense, or no other family would want to marry their son. No wonder. Many of the noble families in the capital have heard the rumors. That is why they went to the south to trick a rich merchant's daughter, taking her money and shaming her. I hear the wealthiest merchant in the south has only one daughter. They're probably planning to bleed her family dry. What a clever scheme! Well, now look, this pampered young lady is not one to take this lying down. Let's see how they get out of this. The crowd chattered excitedly, clearly enjoying the drama. The House of Sterling's reputation was already somewhat tarnished. They had been struggling financially for years, but still maintained their airs of nobility, which had led to much gossip. Last year, after our engagement was settled, they had borrowed 200,000 silver taels from my father, and their return to wealth had surely made them even more arrogant and overbearing, offending many people. Thus, the crowd was happy to watch the show. Hearing these words, Lady Sterling's face grew even paler. She blamed me. She blamed the guests, and she blamed her niece, Evelyn, for insisting on a grand wedding with a 10-mile procession and an embroidered gown, all to exchange vows with her beloved. Now, the family's face was lost for 800 miles. Just as Lady Sterling, filled with resentment, was hoping the Marquis would quickly find a way to suppress the matter, the Marquis of Sterling chose to save himself. He looked at Lady Sterling with feigned anger and disappointment. Nonsense. Utter nonsense. The Marquis had initially wanted to protect his son's reputation, but Alistair had proven to be a disappointment, confronting me directly. So, he had to first let me and the crowd know that the head of the house was a reasonable man. I know you dote on the poor orphan, but doting is not indulging. How could you let her act so willfully to do such a despicable thing? How am I to explain this to my daughter Zan in Zan Law and the Thorne family? The Marquis's performance was filled with righteous indignation and heartbreak. I had to admit, he was quite the actor. My lord, Lady Sterling was a coddled second wife. She usually charmed the Marquis with her gentle and coquettish ways, and had rarely been scolded. Now, being yelled at like this, she began to tremble. She clutched the Marquis's sleeve, her eyes shimmering with tears. Seeing the Marquis giving her a look, she lowered her head and began to wipe her eyes. Fine, she, the weak woman, would take all the blame. But there was someone even weaker than her. Evelyn was now weeping a river of tears. Under the splendor of her phoenix crown and crimson robes, her delicate face was a picture of terror. Her slender frame trembled like a pitiful little rabbit, evoking endless sympathy. Alistair's heroic spirit burst forth. He immediately bent down and held her tight. Evelyn, don't be afraid. I will protect you. Clap, 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 I applauded, smiling. What a fine display of a hero saving a beauty, a talented scholar and a fair lady overcoming all obstacles to be together. Congratulations, congratulations. The love between the second young master and Lady Evelyn is as strong as gold. I should naturally offer my blessings. Here is a wedding gift of 10,000 taels. I smiled sweetly. So, the House of Sterling only needs to return 190,000 taels. The second young master need not worry. Once you return the silver, I will leave immediately. I can't lose both face and fortune, can I? The seated, or rather, standing, as everyone had long since stood up in surprise to watch the spectacle, with some of the more mischievous ones even standing on their stools audience, once again erupted in an uproar. The House of Sterling's reputation for immorality and greed was now cemented. The more principled guests had already begun to condemn them. You venomous woman, how dare you slander our house? Alistair roared, pointing at me in a rage. You think I wanted to marry you? You damn merchant's daughter? Merchant's daughter, a joke! I laughed instead of getting angry. Does the second young master even know what a merchant's daughter is? With this kind of character and knowledge, he still wants to take the imperial examinations. I gestured to Mason with my chin. Mason understood and produced the receipts for the silver transported from the south to the capital, each bearing the signature of the Sterling family steward, guards, and accountant. At the time, the House of Sterling had proposed borrowing the silver to renovate their estate and prepare for the wedding. My father, out of respect for our new in-laws, hadn't made the Marquis write a formal IOU, but he had been cautious. He had used an official security agency instead of our own, and had the Sterling family's steward and guards accompany the transport. Damn you! How dare you plot against us? Alistair's eyes were practically popping out of his head. Don't you have any self-awareness? Marrying into our noble house is a blessing you should be grateful for lifetimes. Evelyn is a well-bred lady. She should have been the principal wife. We gave her place to you, and yet you have the audacity to cause a scene. Plotting. Who is plotting against whom? I looked at Alistair steadily. May I ask the second young master, what do you mean by should have been? If this Lady Evelyn should have been the principal wife, why didn't you marry her properly? Instead, you had to scheme for another woman's dowry, and use another woman's name to give her this wedding ceremony. Don't frighten me. Is your noble house so poor that you can't even afford a wedding? I sneered, and the crowd's chatter grew even more enthusiastic. Cough, cough. The Marquis of Sterling began to cough violently. I glanced over and saw him frantically signaling to Lady Sterling. Unfortunately, Lady Sterling didn't grasp his brilliant plan. After a moment's thought, she walked over to Evelyn and slapped her twice. It is all your fault. Crying and wailing all day about wanting to be the principal wife and have a grand wedding. You had me and Alistair wrapped around your little finger. Sob, 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 Alistair. Evelyn clutched Alistair's sleeve, her sobs pitiful and heart-wrenching. Her moon-like face was streaked with tears, making her look like a fragile snow beauty about to melt. Alistair's heart ached. Mother, how can you blame Evelyn? It was all this wicked woman's scheme. When did the second young master go blind and foolish? I covered my mouth in feigned surprise. Was it I who forced you to lock me in a side courtyard and have Lady Evelyn impersonate me to exchange vows with you? May I ask when you saved my life? Did you save it every day, making me so devoted that I would willingly humiliate myself? The crowd found this amusing. The Marquis's face was turning purple with rage. Fortunately, his loyal servant understood the situation and began to act. My lord, it is terrible. A servant rushed in. The young lord, he is suddenly fallen gravely ill. I fear he won't make it. Actually, the Marquis had intended to feign illness himself, but after frantically signaling for so long, his foolish, coddled wife had failed to understand. And Alistair, the idiot, was still arguing with me, as if the house hadn't been shamed enough. He was going to die of anger from this mother and son pair. With their talents, even if he faked an illness, they wouldn't be able to resolve the situation. It might even turn into a brawl. In a moment of desperation, he had brought out the young lord who had been in seclusion for years. What? How can this be? Quick! Summon the physicians! Bring all the famous physicians in the capital! The Marquess feigned urgency. The immortal Zhang said that with a happy occasion, the young lord's illness would gradually heal. It is all your fault for making such a mess. You've ruined a perfectly good wedding. Hurry up and apologize to Miss Thorne. The Marquess dragged Alistair in front of me. My dear daughter Zan-in-Zan-Law, please calm your anger. It is our fault for spoiling Alistair. From now on, you will discipline him strictly. Alistair was both ashamed and furious. Father, how could you? Shut your mouth, the Marquess hissed in Alistair's ear. If this wedding doesn't happen today, our house will become the laughingstock of the entire capital. Are you a fool? Endure this for a moment, and you'll have a lifetime of wealth to squander? Alistair took a deep breath, looking as if he was enduring a great humiliation. He finally bowed to me, gritting his teeth. I was wrong earlier. Don't hold it against me. You say don't. And I shouldn't. Who do you think you are? My good daughter, Zan-in-Zan-Law. Please forgive Alistair for now. Don't miss the auspicious time for the ceremony, the Marquess pleaded. The young lord has been frail since childhood. I only hope that after this happy occasion, his health will improve, and he will suffer less. My lord, the auspicious time won't be missed. Isn't the second young master in the middle of a ceremony with Lady Evelyn? Let them continue immediately, I interrupted the Marquess, lest his sincere words garner sympathy from the crowd. My good daughter Zan-in-Zan-Law, rest assured, this orphan will never marry Alistair, not even as a concubine. The Marquess shot a fierce glare at Evelyn. Quick! Lock her in the side courtyard! Evelyn trembled with fear, then lunged forward, grabbing my skirt and kowtowing repeatedly. Sister, sister, I was wrong. I deserve to die. But Alistair and I are truly in love. Please, sister, forgive me. I am willing to be your servant, to serve you with all my heart. Evelyn's Beauty and the Beast act was quite clever. At least the sound of her genuine kowtows was quite moving, and would likely stir the protective instincts of many men. Alistair was clearly heartbroken, pulling her into his arms. Amelia Thorne, what more do you want? Alistair bellowed. Seriously, big brother. When the famous physicians of the capital arrive, have them treat you properly. What more do I want? I've already said I'll let you two be together. Let you finish your ceremony. Why do you keep dragging me into this? I pouted, seeing the Marquess about to speak again. A flash of inspiration struck me, and I spoke first. My lord, I know why the young lord's illness has worsened, despite the happy occasion. I knew full well that my bridal sedan had already entered their gates, and that I had thoroughly shamed them. They would never let me leave unscathed, even if it meant sacrificing the last shred of their family's honor. So, I might as well make them as disgusted as possible. Because from the very beginning, you were trying to bring good fortune to the wrong person. I said with a sweet smile, since this is to bring good fortune to the young lord, why is the second young master getting married? It should be the young lord who is getting married. What do you mean by that? The Marquess was stunned, clearly not expecting me to take such an unconventional route. The affection between the second young master and Lady Evelyn is plain for all to see. I waved my gold Zan-embroidered red sleeve, pointing at the embracing couple. If we were to break up such a devoted pair of lovebirds, I fear we would face retribution. How could I, Amelia Thorne, be so wicked? It would be better to... I toyed with the jeweled and encrusted fan in my hand, the red gems flashing, and smiled. Marry the young lord to bring him good fortune. Perhaps it will cure his illness and lead to a new, happy marriage. The Marquess was dumbfounded. Lady Sterling, a little slow on the uptake, finally reacted. No, that is not possible. Amelia Thorne, what nonsense are you spouting? Alistair shot up. I've already said I'm willing to marry you. Why are you still talking nonsense? You are willing to marry me, I scoffed. Why don't you ask if I'm still willing to marry you? My lord, we can't let her do this. Lady Sterling, in her panic, forgot about the watching crowd and shook the Marquess's arm. You have to think of something. Lady Sterling was so wary because the young lord was not her son. Before the engagement, my father had made inquiries in the capital. The Marquis of Stirling had 2 sons, the heir Lord Julian, born of his first wife, and the second son, Lord Alistair, born of his second wife. When Julian was 6 months old, his mother passed away from illness. The Marquis mourned for a mere 6 months before remarrying Lady Stirling, under the pretext that his infant son needed a mother. Within a year, Lady Stirling gave birth to Alistair. The couple treated their younger son as the jewel of the house. The family of 3 was a picture of happiness, and the elder son, Julian, was rarely seen. The official word from the house was that Julian, like his mother, was frail and needed to recuperate in his chambers. Before Julian was officially named the heir, the Marquis had even petitioned the Emperor to name his second son as heir instead, citing his eldest son's poor health. The eldest son, though ill, is still alive. The rules cannot be broken, the Emperor had declared, settling the matter. It was said that on the day of his investiture, Julian wore a sea-tan blue, silvered zan-scaled ceremonial robe. He was slender and handsome, with a noble and aloof air like a celestial being, earning him endless praise. But, even so, everyone still considered the second son, Alistair, to be the true heir of the house. Because after Julian was named the heir, rumors spread like wildfire, all predicting that he would not live past his 20th year. Alistair was 17, which meant Julian was 19. According to the rumors, his life was hanging by a thread. Lily tugged at my sleeve. I smiled and shook my head, signaling that it was fine. My dear daughter, Zan-in-Zan-Law, I know you're angry, but you mustn't speak rashly, the Marquis said, his brow furrowed. After this scene, he had realized I was not to be trifled with, and for a moment, he couldn't guess what I was planning. My lord, rest assured, I am not acting on impulse, I said, meeting his suspicious gaze with a calm smile. Though I am young and from a merchant family, I am aware of customs and etiquette. The second young master and Lady Evelyn's disgraceful behavior is their own affair. I cannot follow their example. I shot a contemptuous look at Alistair and continued. The bridal sedan has entered the gates, so there is no reason for it to leave immediately. It is a coincidence that the young lord fell ill at this very moment, reminding us of the matter of bringing good fortune. It seems like fate. Why doesn't the Marquis agree to this marriage? While the Marquis was deliberating, I covered my mouth with my fan and said in a voice only he could hear, Please, my lord, do not be foolish. After how the second young master has treated me, I will never sacrifice my dignity to marry him. The bridal sedan will not leave. At worst, I, Amelia Thorne, will walk out on my own, or you can have your guards tie me up and carry me out. The Marquis's face darkened. After a moment's thought, he relented. Very well. Then I thank the Marquis for his consent. My lord, how can this be? How can this be? Lady Stirling shook her head in protest, but the Marquis gripped her wrist fiercely. Say no more. Lock the second young master and this orphan in their rooms separately. Go and see if the young lord has recovered enough to be helped out for the ceremony. Actually, I had guessed 8 or 9/10 of the Marquis's plan. The young lord, Julian, was ill. If he were to die young, I would become the family's widow. Though I could remarry with the help of my father's money, he would have ample opportunity before then to find ways to transfer my dowry to his name. If Julian lingered on, then Alistair's son would be adopted into the main branch, and the fortune would belong to his grandson. The noble house would remain wealthy. A clever plan. But he had made the same mistake as his foolish son. That is, I, Amelia Thorne, was never one to be slaughtered at will. My lord, the young lord says... The servant glanced at me. The young lord says he cannot go through the ceremony in a daze. He needs to meet Miss Thorne. That is as it should be. I nodded. Please, my lord and my lady, entertain the guests for a while. As I had guessed, the young lord did not live in the main courtyard, but in a small courtyard on the west side of the estate, and he was not ill at all. Instead, he was standing on the veranda, gazing at the sky. Greetings, my lord, I said, bowing humbly. This whole farce had nothing to do with him. He stood there, a solitary figure in a white robe. The paper fan in his hand was plain, with no paintings of flowers or grass, no lines of poetry, but his long, slender fingers, like jade bamboo, fanned it back and forth, making it seem like a powerful weapon. "Miss Thorne, why do you want to marry me?" "I don't think this is a good way to end this farce," Julian said, his voice as clear and cool as a mountain stream. Very pleasant to the ear. "Thank you for the advice, my lord. I know that too. It is just that I am utterly unwilling to trample on my own dignity and marry Alistair." I sighed. "I hope the young lord can do me this favor. It is not that I can't help you, but the consequences." Julian turned his head to look at me, and was taken aback by my star-struck expression. He was so ethereal and handsome, so pleasing to the eye and soul, so good-looking. "Ahem," he coughed lightly, his sword-like brows knitting together. His eyes, like deep, cold moonlit pools, seemed to ripple, shattering the stars within. "I know one shouldn't judge a book by its cover," I said with a placating smile. "But I also know that one's appearance reflects one's heart." Julian averted his gaze slightly, avoiding my ardent stare. "Miss Thorne is as radiant as the morning sun, bright and graceful. To change the course of your life over a bit of mud and stained willow catkin. Will you truly not regret it?" "To be honest, my lord, I was a little apprehensive when I came, but after meeting you, I am only pleasantly surprised. I am a straightforward person, and do not like to hide my feelings. Otherwise, I would not have caused such a scene at the wedding ceremony, and dared to propose a last-minute change of grooms." A hint of a smile touched Julian's lips, but his expression grew somber. "You must know my path is not an easy one. That is why I'm here to help you." I smiled. The Marquis of Stirling had a flash of inspiration, and wanted to use the pretext of bringing good fortune to stop me. Since that is the case, why don't we both get what we want and give it a good try? Perhaps an unintentional act will lead to a long and happy marriage. Julian finally nodded. At that moment, Mason arrived on light feet, presenting a wedding robe. "Young master, I just rushed to the embroidery shop to get this. It has never been worn by anyone else." "Thank you for your trouble," Julian said, the coldness in his brows receding slightly, replaced by a flicker of life. I thought, he must have a secret. The festive music swelled again, fireworks bloomed in the sky. Julian and I, holding a red silk ribbon, returned to the main hall. Although a pair of impostors had already gone through half the ceremony, providing the guests with a spectacular show, their enthusiasm had not waned. They watched with great interest the newly formed couple before them. The Marquis of Stirling's heir is cool and handsome, and Miss Thorne is bright and beautiful. They are an unexpectedly good match. Yes, who would have thought that this would turn out so well? Perhaps it will really cure the young lord's illness. Then aren't the Marchioness and the second young master just shooting themselves in the foot? They've lost a fortune that was right at their doorstep. Lady Stirling gritted her teeth in anger as she listened. Or rather, she probably didn't hear, as the music was deafening, but the mocking gazes of the gossipers pierced her heart's deepest worries, wishing that Julian would just fall ill and die on the spot. Of course, her wish would not come true. When Julian and I were talking earlier, he had already regained some of his vitality. I had a vague feeling that he had confined himself to the side courtyard, not to recuperate, but to preserve his life, and I was likely to be his savior. Due to Julian's public illness, he naturally did not have to personally entertain the guests. Therefore, we both returned to the bridal chamber almost at the same time. "Suddenly getting married, not used to it, are you?" I smiled. Fortunately, Lily had been restrained when decorating the room, partly due to the lack of time, and had not transformed his elegant and refined chamber into a garishly bright and festive space. She had only added a few pairs of dragon and phoenix, painted red candles, red gauze lanterns with the double happiness symbol, a screen embroidered with mandarin ducks playing in the water, and a crimson bed canopy with intertwined flowers. Julian sat down next to me, his cool and solitary figure bathed in a rosy glow. "Not at all. I am also pleasantly surprised. It is like a koi fish suddenly swimming into a cold, deep pool. That is an interesting analogy, my lord, I said, putting down my fan and smiling gracefully. But I don't think my lord is a deep pool, but rather a spring that has been forced to freeze over by the malice of those around him. Miss Thorne, may I call you my coy lady? Julian was infected by my smile, his lips curving into a gentle spring breeze. My coy lady, are you telling your husband that you are the fire that melts the ice, bright and scorching? Naturally. I winked, my eyes as bright as stars. Please, my husband, tell me about the chessboard. We will solve it together. The next morning, I dutifully went to serve tea to the Marquis and Lady Sterling, informing them that Julian was feeling unwell and would not be coming. Lady Sterling secretly observed my expression. I feigned indifference, even forcing a smile and calling her mother. Why don't I see the second young master and our cousin? Of course, my dutifulness had its limits. My smile began to take on a playful edge. I was so looking forward to hearing them call me Sister Zan Law. The Marquis frowned but held his tongue. For now, he still had to humor me. My dear daughter Zan Law, you jest. They have committed a great wrong and must be confined for at least a month. Father is truly strict, I said with a faint smile, not pressing the matter further. By the way, Mother, I have a matter I would like to discuss with you. The Marquis and Lady Sterling exchanged a look, both worried that I was about to cause more trouble. I was thinking, the young lord's illness must be due to a congenital deficiency and requires proper nourishment. I remembered my father once said that a few years ago, he traded some rare jewels with a merchant from the Eastern Spirit Kingdom for 2,000 danyards in old Lingji mushrooms. I would like to send someone back to the south to fetch them immediately. I am informing you of this, Father and Mother, so that you don't mistakenly think I am sending a letter to my father to complain. Seeing their embarrassed expressions, I added, if Father and Mother need anything, you can also send a letter with my messenger. We don't need anything. If the 1,000 danyards and old Lingji can cure Julian's illness, we would be happy too, the Marquis said with a not so happy expression. Father, rest assured, I have heard that the Lingji from the Eastern Spirit Kingdom is excellent. An ordinary one costs 100 gold taels, and 1,000 danyards an old one is worth 10,000. A cure for all illnesses, and can extend one's life by at least 10 years. I have heard of such a thing, but it must be transported with the utmost care, Lady Sterling said, clearly intrigued. She tugged at the Marquis's sleeve. My lord, you should send your guards along with the Thorne family's bodyguards. Indeed, the Marquis agreed, nodding. Thank you, Father and Mother. My objective achieved, I bowed and took my leave. After that, under the pretext of taking care of Julian, I only visited them every few days. Then, I had the servants spread rumors that I, the pampered merchant's daughter, slept in until the sun was high in the sky every day. Taking care of the young lord? It is a wonder he is not taking care of her. Exactly, it is a good thing the young lord is too weak to scold her. He is supposed to be recuperating, but she has her maids telling stories. He is drinking his medicine, and she is eating sweets next to him. I don't know what kind of good fortune she is bringing. These words clearly put Lady Sterling at ease. She began to pester the Marquis to find a good match for Alistair to regain their family's honor. As for Evelyn, after being raised in their house for over a decade and causing such a huge scandal, allowing her to be a concubine was already a great favor. The Marquis also wanted to regain his honor, but circumstances did not allow it. Everyone already knew that the House of Sterling was an empty shell, that the money for the wedding had been borrowed from the bride, and that their table manners were atrocious. Alistair had switched brides on his wedding day, showing favor to his concubine before his wife had even entered the gates. In summary, the second young master of the House of Sterling was talentless, penniless, and immoral. What noble family would want to marry their daughter to such a man? The Marquess worked tirelessly for 3 months, and finally arranged a marriage. The good news, the bride was a general's daughter. The bad news, the bride was a Dvork Fae. She had injured her ex-Dan husband during an argument last year, and they had divorced. Alistair was initially reluctant, but when the Marquis told him that the general would help him secure a position at court, that the bride was beautiful and came with 100 Zancart dowry, and had promised never to lay a hand on her husband again, he agreed. On the wedding day, Julian and I also went to observe the ceremony. Alistair was extremely smug, repeatedly sending glances my way, trying to show off his good marriage. Julian, ever the protective husband, blocked my face with his fan. The fan was no longer blank. It now depicted a pair of koi fish, holding your hand through the clear and happy years. The next day, the new bride served tea. As the elder sister Zan in Zan Law, I also received a cup. The new bride, named Freya, was a beauty, but her eyes were sharp. I had a feeling Alistair wouldn't be able to handle her. After serving tea, Freya saw that Julian looked as frail as the rumors suggested, and seemed quite relieved. After taking a seat, Freya smiled brightly and said to Lady Sterling, "Mother, I have heard that my husband's heart belongs to Lady Evelyn. Why don't we make it a double happiness today, and have her come serve tea and become my husband's concubine?" Freya's words were truly unexpected. After a moment of surprise, Lady Sterling's face lit up with a smile. "What a good child. So virtuous and considerate of your husband." Unlike... Lady Sterling was about to continue, but was silenced by the Marquis's cough. After all, my money was still playing an important role. Although Freya had brought a generous dowry, the general's status was there, and he wouldn't dare to take a share. Soon, Evelyn came to serve tea. Freya helped her up with great affection. "Sister is so beautiful, truly a sight to behold." Freya had her maid give Evelyn a gift, a gold hairpin with a pomegranate design. "I wish sister an early birth for my husband." Watching Freya, I felt something was not right, but their family was getting along harmoniously. What was there for Julian and me, the side branch, to say? "My husband, let me help you back to rest." Julian and I walked back to our side courtyard. From the non-moo path to the bluestone slabs, and then to the gravel path, Julian saw my silence and said softly, "The path you have chosen, you must walk it, whether it is paved with brocade or tiles. An observer cannot awaken a person in the midst of a game. They too have the opportunity to wake up and withdraw. It all depends on whether they are too obsessed." In the blink of an eye, it was early autumn. Julian's illness worsened. I went to see the Marquis and Lady Sterling with a worried expression. "Father, mother, my husband's illness is getting worse." I was thinking, even the 1,000 danyards and old Lingji has been used, yet there is no improvement. I fear it is not good. I twisted my handkerchief, a rare departure from my usual arrogance. In his dreams, he talks nonsense, always wishing he had been to the south. He says the scenery in the south is picturesque, a paradise in the mouths of so many scholars. He really wants to go, and he has never met my father. Can I take him there to fulfill his wish? I asked sadly. Lady Sterling only wanted Julian to die sooner. She was eager for him to undertake a tiring journey and hasten his demise. The Marquis, though not as eager as Lady Sterling, saw no harm in it. The two of them agreed without much thought. After 2 days of hasty preparations, Julian and I were ready to leave. Unexpectedly, Alistair and Evelyn came to see us off. "Brother, that is good. I thought you'd be trapped in this little courtyard for the rest of your life," Alistair said, looking at Julian's sickly face with a smug smile. "It is good to have some fun in the south. A final fling, you know. By the way, Sister Zan and Zan Law, you must be careful." Alistair smiled, giving me a sharp look. "Don't let my brother die on the road." "Alistair." I bit my lip about to curse him, but he leaned in with a lewd and playful whisper. "Don't curse. You should be trying to please me. Otherwise, when you're a lonely widow, I won't come to comfort you." I took a deep breath, suppressing my anger. We were leaving soon. I shouldn't cause any trouble. Unexpectedly, Evelyn also joined in the fun. She walked up to me, her slender hand gently stroking her slightly protruding belly. "Sister Jan in Zan Law, don't worry. I am already with child. This child can be registered under the young lord's and your name. You don't have to worry about being thrown out of the house. The title and property will have an heir." "That is very kind of you. I forced a smile and got into the carriage. Once the carriage left the capital, Julian immediately wiped the powder from his face with a handkerchief, his healthy complexion returning. My coy lady, I've gotten so thin from pretending to be sick all this time. Let's find an inn quickly and let me have a big meal. Haha, I never knew my cool and elegant husband could be such a glutton. I teased with a laugh. What can I do? I've been surrounded by your delicious food every day. I can barely resist. And Julian pulled me into his arms, warming his hands before carefully placing them on my belly. Our child is hungry too. Hemph, you only care about your child, I pouted. I'm just giving you face. Should I say you're a gluttonous lady? What are you talking about? We playfully bickered, our faces wreathed in smiles. Yes, this was our plan. Julian had been pretending to be ill because his real illness was a poison he had been afflicted with before he was even born. Years ago, Lady Sterling was the daughter of a minor official, desperate to climb the social ladder. At a flower viewing party in the Sterling estate, she had set her sights on the then Zan heir. The heir, despite his wife being pregnant, was swayed by the beauty's affections, and promised to make his lover his principal wife. In this respect, Alistair had truly inherited his parents' fine traditions. Later, under the guise of visiting the old dowager, Lady Sterling frequently visited the estate, even bringing the heir's wife homemade pastries. The heir's wife, seeing her as pretty and harmless, had no suspicions, and even thought of arranging a good marriage for her. After the heir's wife gave birth to Julian, she was bedridden. Although the family suspected something, they kept quiet for the sake of the heir's future, even bribing the imperial physician to declare her death as due to frailty. Lady Sterling had intended to harm Julian as well, but the old dowager summoned her to the ancestral hall and disciplined her, also scolding her philandering and cruel son. But the old dowager was not seeking justice for her deceased daughter Zan Law. She was warning them that this could not happen again. If an enemy were to find out and expose the matter, the entire house would be ruined. What if he wants revenge for his mother when he grows up? In his condition, he probably won't grow up. After some discussion, the two conspirators concluded that since Julian was frail and wouldn't live long anyway, they would endure for the time being. Fortunately, the heir's wife had a few loyal servants. They moved with Julian to the side courtyard, secretly seeking medical treatment and nourishing him with food. His health gradually improved, but he continued to feign illness. As Julian approached his 20th year, they dreamed of an opportunity to rescue him from the prison of the Sterling estate. They never imagined that what is gained on the swings is lost on the roundabouts. Alistair, inheriting his parents' viciousness, had played a switcheroo, sending me, the new bride, to Julian's side. That day, Julian and I were accompanying my father on a boat trip on the lake, when a servant came rushing to report that the Marquis and Lady Sterling had both fallen ill, and that the second young master's household was in chaos. We were not surprised about the Marquis and Lady Sterling. When I mentioned the 1,000-year-old Lingjia, I had seen the greed in Lady Sterling's eyes. I knew she would switch the Lingjia and take it for herself and the Marquis. Moreover, she couldn't let Julian have any chance of recovery. They had reaped what they sowed, and I couldn't be bothered. As for the chaos in Alistair's household, was it because of a dispute over the distribution of the Lingjia? Surely not. On our way back to the capital, Julian and I sent a few of our men back to the estate to investigate. The Marquess and Lady Sterling's illness was strange. The imperial physicians couldn't diagnose it, and could only surmise that they had been afflicted by some evil fire. They were weak and bedridden all day, but their minds were still clear. Lady Sterling mentioned the 1,000-year-old Lingjia, but the maid I had left behind interrupted her sharply. My lady wants the 1,000-year-old Lingjia. Let me see if there is any left in the side courtyard. Speaking of this Lingjia, we thought it was useless at first, but who would have thought that the young lord would recover on his way back to the south? Our young lady was so happy, she had her father spend a fortune to buy more. As for Alistair's household, the chaos was due to something else. No wonder I had felt that her expression was a little off, and she had prepared the pomegranate hairpin as a gift so early. It seemed she treated Evelyn as dirt under her feet, And Freya had done something even more terrifying. After Evelyn was 3 months pregnant, Freya brought in a divine physician to determine the sex of the baby. The physician said it was a girl. Although Evelyn and Alistair were disappointed, they thought there was still time. Since Julian was on his deathbed, they didn't have to be too anxious, but Freya was displeased. She had her maids brew an abortion-inducing medicine and forced it down Evelyn's throat. Evelyn cried and moaned, her cries of Alistair tearing at his heart. He wanted to say something, but was silenced by a sharp look from Freya. The few maids Freya had brought with her were clearly ruthless and skilled in martial arts. Alistair was under constant surveillance, practically a prisoner. After Evelyn's miscarriage, Freya gave her no time to rest. Every day, her maids forced her to drink fertility-boosting soups. Alistair was not spared either. And to make matters worse, Alistair and Evelyn had also received some of the 1,000-year-old Lingji from Lady Stirling. Although they had thought they were still young and would eat it later, they had tasted a little and were also slightly poisoned. Their bodies weak, yet they were tortured by Freya in this way. I won't describe the torture in detail, but basically, Alistair and Evelyn were locked in a room, and a hard Zan find incense was burned. Such a way of happily ever after was truly something else. All I can say is, wicked people will be tormented by other wicked people. As for whether I was afraid of the 1,000-year-old Lingji being investigated, I was not worried. From beginning to end, the Lingji I bought was to cure Julian's illness. They had been deceived by charlatans and bought poisonous Lingja. What did that have to do with me? My husband was cured, a handsome and elegant gentleman, as gentle as jade, unparalleled in the world. Julian and I traveled leisurely. During this time, we had someone buy the mansion next to the Stirling estate. When the time came, we would just push down the wall of the side courtyard, and it would be our own paradise. After returning to the capital, Julian settled me in our paradise, and then went to pay his respects to the Marquis, looking dashing and handsome. As the elder brother, he naturally had to show concern for his younger brother. Unfortunately, his younger brother and the concubine were still locked in their room, so he only met with his sister Zan Law. Sister Zan Law is truly virtuous, Julian said, not wanting to stay long. Thank you for the compliment, my lord, Freya said with a forced smile, immediately seeing him off. On our child's 100th day, I held him, wrapped in a colorful embroidered swaddling cloth, and went with Julian to visit the sick. I held the fair and lovely infant at a distance for the Marquis and Lady Stirling to see, my face wreathed in a smile. My lord and my lady can rest assured. My husband's health is much better, and the young master is healthy. The house's title and my father's fortune have an heir. Lady Stirling glared at me, furious but had no strength to curse. As luck would have it, just as we were about to leave, a maid rushed in. Frantic, "My lady, it is terrible. Concubine Evelyn has gone into premature labor because her body is too weak. She is bleeding heavily. The midwife says she probably won't be able to conceive again." "And the child?" Lady Stirling asked with difficulty. "It is a young master, but he is too small. Not even 3 pounds. I'm afraid he won't be easy to raise." Lady Stirling was about to faint from anger, but 2 more servants rushed in, shouting even louder than the maid. "My lord, my lady, it is terrible. The second lady is cursing the second young master and concubine Evelyn for being useless. The second young master started a fight with her. We tried to stop them, but the second young master coughed up blood from anger. This time, even the Marquis couldn't take it. He collapsed on the bed in a rage. Oh, he was already lying down, but his complexion had turned even more ashen. Julian shook his head and ordered, "Summon all the famous physicians. Arrange for 2 for the Marquis, the Marchioness, the second young master, and concubine Evelyn each. Have them diagnose and prescribe medicine properly. Take care of them. My lady, let's go home." Julian took the child from my arms, and I linked my arm with his, and we left together. I was very happy. The path we had chosen was overflowing with happiness. As for the thorns they had chosen for themselves, there was nothing we could do.